It takes time for a young brand that has basically no brand presence at the start, because when people are asking ChatGPT, Claude for recommendations of companies in that space, what those LLMs are going to do is two things. They're going to pull from their training data, and their training data is obviously going to bias towards the biggest companies in that space because that's what they saw when they were ingesting all of their initial training data. And so if you're an up and coming brand, you're not in that. So your avenue in to AI visibility is search. A lot of people in marketing right now are talking about AI citations. That's a means to the end. You want them to cite you so that you're influencing what they're doing. But if they're not recommending you as a brand in the output text, very few people are clicking into the citations and reading them and then concluding on their own. I want to point this out as an example of another myth in AI search that our data with Redline and many other clients busts, is that this idea that you can't get this kind of visibility with self-promotional posts. Absolutely you can. Welcome to another episode of the Grow and Convert Marketing Show. Today's episode is going to be a solo episode with just me walking through a case study of growing the AI visibility of a young brand that does not have a lot of online brand presence. Benji is in Europe, so we're doing this solo from California. And the brand I want to talk about is Redline Capital. And by the way, for those that are listening on the podcast, this one's going to be a tough one to follow along without the visuals. So you can watch us on YouTube if you want to see the visuals that I'll be pointing to, but I will try my best to narrate so that you still get value from the podcast. So I'll narrate what I'm actually pointing to and looking at as best as I can. And if you really want to see the visuals and get the full benefit of this one, you should go to YouTube. You can find all of these episodes on YouTube at Grow and Convert. So let's talk about the client. It's Redline Capital. They're a business funding company. And they came to us after having done mostly outbound and wanted to sort of build an inbound engine. And we are helping Nicole, the founder there, do the organic side. So both SEO and AI search. And what I want to talk about is their AI search visibility. It takes time for a young brand that has basically no brand presence at the start, because when people are asking ChatGPT, Claude for recommendations of companies in that space, what those LLMs are going to do is two things. They're going to pull from their training data, and their training data is obviously going to bias towards the biggest companies in that space because that's what they saw when they were ingesting all of their initial training data. They saw the biggest brands that were mentioned everywhere. And so if you're an up and coming brand, you're not in that. So your avenue in to AI visibility is search, because boiling down a complicated thing to sort of oversimplify, there's really two ways. There's not strictly, there's also content partners and other things. But for most brands, it's worth thinking of it as two ways to influence LLMs. Number one is being in their initial understanding of that space. What I casually call training data. In LLM speak, it's referred to as their parametric model. So in this case, business loan, business funding companies, it has a parametric model, meaning it has parameters that sort of understands the concepts in that space. Just like if you ask ChatGPT a physics question, it has a model based on all of the physics stuff that it has ingested in its initial training of how physics works. So same with companies in your space. It has its understanding, its model of the world. And that comes from its initial training data and whatever else they're doing in the background. And that's called the parametric model. If you're an up and coming brand, it's very hard to influence that. You really can't do much other than just be present and do your marketing. So to get into that is just all of your marketing influences that. So your avenue in, what a lot of people refer to as your wedge, your avenue in is through search, because that's the other component that influences LLMs. When you ask LLMs, we've all experienced this. When you ask LLMs for product recommendations, what do? They say searching the web. That's your ticket in. What they're actually doing on the back end, of course, is combining that. They have their existing model of how your space works. It's a parametric model based on the training data. Then they search the web to make sure that it has the most current information, and it sort of synthesizes it. We don't know exactly how it does that, right? Unless you're a machine learning engineer at OpenAI, Anthropic, or Google, and even then, they may not actually fully know the dynamics of how it synthesizes. But that's your wedge in when you're a new brand, is through search. That foundation is prioritized GEO. So I'm going to start off by showing you, just reminding folks what prioritized GEO is and how that pyramid works. So I'm on our prioritized GEO post, and just to review the pyramid, everything I explained is sort of the argument behind why we put owned content as tier 1, or really you can talk about tier 1 and 2, is we're saying that, and we have a full video on prioritized GEO, and so you can find that on our channel or that episode in our podcast feed, wherever you're listening to this. But our argument is most people on GEO are talking about this tier 3 content tweak stuff, which is once they've gotten to your site, how do we help make your site more crawlable to these LLMs? Our argument is most of this is hearsay. We have yet to see good data that it's sort of any of these things are proven. And they can already index your site. They can understand English like a regular person. So they understand natural language just fine. And so instead, your avenue in is to show up on when they search the web for product or service recommendations when their users are asking about brands and companies like yours, and products like yours, and services like yours. And so there's two ways to do that. Be in other people's results on Google for those searches that the LLMs might do, or have your own result. We suggest almost everyone start with their own result. You could do number 2, which is offsite, but the problem with offsite is you can't control the narrative, and it's not your site. It just takes time, effort, money to do this. And if you get a mention, it's a short mention. The owned content, and we'll show an example with Redline in this case study. What the advantage that owned content has is several over offsite mentions. Number 1, you don't need to ask anyone for permission. Almost every company has the operational horsepower to be able to publish content on their site. So there's just like an execution ease. Number 2, you have all the space in the world to control your narrative. And what we argue in topic-based GEO is that actually the way LLMs recommend solutions in their output text and say, use this brand. We're not talking about citations. And I'll show with Redline the difference. When they actually make a recommendation and say use it, which is what you're going after. A lot of people in marketing right now are talking about AI citations. That's a means to the end. You want them to cite you so that you're influencing what they're doing. But if they're not recommending you as a brand in the output text, very few people are clicking into the citations and reading them and then concluding on their own. They're going off of what ChatGPT, Claude recommends to them in that product space. And so that recommendation happens with an extreme amount of specificity. That when someone, and there's a third post that sort of completes our trifecta of AI strategy called invisible prompts. And this diagram at the top shows it exactly, is when somebody asks, I'm looking for something. In this example, it says, find me a content agency. So for those listening, the diagram is a schematic of an iceberg, and the iceberg above the surface, someone asks ChatGPT, find me a content agency. You think that that's it, but this is not Google. Actually, ChatGPT, and we show under the surface a bunch of text representing this, knows a bunch of detail about that user. And it's using that detail to recommend content agencies that are right for them. So even if the prompt doesn't say, find me a content agency for XYZ scenario with this budget in this space with this use case, and we have these pain points and we have these specific stuff, ChatGPT already knows that. Claude already knows that about the user from their context history. So it will recommend things for them, meaning your content needs to be really specific. And tying all the way back to the GEO pyramid, I realize I didn't explain this to folks that are just listening. There's 3 tiers to our prioritized GEO pyramid. The bottom foundation is tier 1 owned content, the middle tier 2 offsite mentions, and the top tier 3 on-site tactics. And our argument is you work your way from the bottom up in terms of priority. That's why it's called prioritized GEO, because we think too many brands are wasting time doing it in inverse. So the reason tier 1 is owned content and not offsite is that gives you the canvas in which to paint the picture for LLMs of all the really specific scenarios where your brand, product, or service is best. What users, what scenarios, the case studies. You can't do that offsite. You can maybe pay some $200 for this little mention of you or a link in some other thing, but the context isn't there for you to be recommended really specifically. So that's all of our strategy background. Now let's look at Redline Capital. So what I'm pulling up here is our Traqer dashboard. This is at Traqer.ai. We built this. So unlike Peak, Profound, and all, this is an AI visibility tool built by us practitioners of this. We do this every day. This is our lifeblood. We do this for clients. This is our business. We're not sort of tech bros building a tech product without understanding of the space. We use it every day. I want to start off with a simple graph of LLM visibility percentage combined across all the 5 LLMs we're tracking for Redline Capital: ChatGPT, Perplexity, AI Overview, AI Mode, and Gemini. And you see this sort of nice linear steady growth. Back in November, when we actually started with them in May, but when we started tracking them in Traqer, it was November. We had basically zero visibility for the topics we were tracking. And now we're at 29%, nearly 30% visibility. What that means, what is that percentage? It means on the topics we're tracking, or in this case, actually it's prompt based, of the 83 prompts we're tracking, almost 30% of the time, Redline Capital is either mentioned as a brand or cited. And by the way, those are very different, and we're going to separate the two shortly. But this is just the percentage of the prompts you're tracking where you have either a brand mention or citation. We actually think that's not the best way to do it. And that's how actually a lot of other AI visibility tools work, by the way, is they just give you that one number, 29%. Last week, it was 29%. The week before, it was 22%. So you see growth. And there is growth here. The problem with this is if we scroll down, we see something very different. Now I'm going to scroll down the Traqer dashboard, and you see that it's organized by topic area. It's not just a bunch of disparate prompts on one line each. So we see same-day business loans we're just setting up, by the way, so that we're going to ignore that. So there's no prompts there. But the next topic we see is revenue-based financing companies. After that, something very different, construction line of credit. Let's just explore that for a second. And actually, wait, and I'll contrast that with something where we have a lot more mentions, which is merchant cash advance for electrician, merchant cash advance for senior care facilities, and lawn care business cash advance. So there's these 3 topics where the folks watching on YouTube see a bunch of green bubbles, a bunch of citations, a bunch of brand mentions across the prompts in these topics. Merchant cash advance essentially for electrician, senior care facilities, or lawn care. But if we scroll back up for these topics like revenue-based financing companies or construction line of credit, we see almost nothing. For revenue-based finance companies, they have 0 visibility right now. For construction line of credit, only 1. In Perplexity, for one of the prompts, there is a citation, no brand mention, nothing else anywhere else in any other AI tool. You see, the problem is when you see a graph like this of just a single visibility percentage going up, all of that topic-based nuance and detail is gone. So if this company was like, listen, the only thing that matters to us is visibility for revenue-based financing companies, then it looks like you have a bunch of visibility, but actually you don't in that topic. If you don't separate the way you're analyzing your AI visibility by topic, you lose this really important nuance. So this other way and then this other thing we can do is there's a misalignment of incentives. That's the other problem, is a marketing team or an agency that wants to make themselves look better to executives, all they have to do is stop tracking revenue-based financing companies, construction line of credit, or basically remove any prompts where there's 0 visibility, and all of a sudden these percentages will go up. So what we built into Traqer that we think is a more honest and accurate way to view it is topic-based visibility. And you see even better growth there. What this is counting is it's not a percentage anymore. It's a count. A raw count number. You see on the y-axis, it's 0 to 50. And what this is counting is the number of topics, or really topic and LLM combination. So we're tracking 19 topics total, but 19 times 5 is 95, or at least I hope it is. Yeah, it must be, because 20 times 5 is 100. So 19 times 5 is 95 different topic and LLM combinations. On how many of them do we have some visibility, meaning at least one prompt in the topic is lit up green with a brand mention or citation, and we can toggle that later, and how many of them have greater than 50% of the prompts we have some visibility? And that's the teal line versus some visibility is the orange line. And you see both of them going up. This cannot be gamed or manipulated. If you remove, if the sort of self-serving marketer, agency or in-house, removes prompts or entire topics, like they just remove revenue-based financing companies, these numbers don't go up because they're not a percentage, it's a raw count. So the only way to get this to go up is actually to start showing up for topics. And therefore, we think this is a more honest way to do it, to track it. Most AI visibility tools don't have this. They're not built like this because they're not built by practitioners who are doing this every day for real clients where real business is on the line. They're just building tech tools. So this is a more honest way to do it. Now let's separate. So we have overall growth for this. How are we getting this growth? Simple. Tier 1 owned content. If we look into this, now that we see the topics, we can go into merchant cash advance for senior care facility. And you see that for the prompt fastest merchant cash advance for senior care facility, we have a brand mention. And actually, before I click into it, let me answer a question some may have, which is, where do these prompts come from? And there's a misunderstanding from a lot of folks that, oh, people are searching for this. They think prompt tracking in AI visibility is the same or analogous to keyword research or keyword volume rank tracking in SEO. Specifically, they think when tools like Traqer come up with these prompts, that means they know that that's what people are searching for in ChatGPT. We do not. And my argument is almost every single other tool does not. There are some, like Profound, that have access, or they say they have access to some data set of, I don't know, millions. You can look up what they say on their website. Don't hold my word for the exact number, or some large number of prompts that real users have done. It's true, they have that. That's called clickstream data. What that is people who have opted in, hopefully knowingly, opted in to having their web browsing tracked. And so those people with either like a web extension or something, they've opted into this. They maybe get some small amount of money or some, tokens or something in some system or with some company. They get their web browsing tracked and they are getting data of what these people are typing into these AI tools. There's a couple issues with this that hamper or don't give you the accuracy that people think it gives you. People think it's like SEO, where like Google has all this search data and they just tell you in Google Keyword Planner back in the day, or these third-party tools like SEMrush, Ahrefs, they just tell you search volumes because they're tracking that stuff. It doesn't work like that for a couple of reasons. Number one, that clickstream data is a tiny fraction of the amount of people that are using AI tools. Especially if you're selling high-end B2B services. If you're saying, oh, our ideal customer is the head of HR, the CEO founder, you think those people are downloading these web extensions and having all of their web browsing tracked? I don't think so. So if you're tracking people, if you're getting the data from people who are getting their web browsing tracked for a few dollars or points in some like online system, and that's not your target customer is CEOs, CMOs, CIOs, CTOs, then there's already a mismatch. So you're not going to see their real behavior. But the second one is invisible prompts. Even if your tool were to actually tell you exactly what they're typing in, what it doesn't tell you is the contextual detail that's giving a personalized answer to your user that you can't reproduce, that your tool, whether it's Traqer, whether it's Peak, whether it's Profound, whether it's Scrunch, whatever, cannot reproduce. It doesn't have the personalization of your user. So when your user asks, find me a content agency, they're not going to get the same answer as you. And we have an example here of it inside this post. So what Traqer does, this is one of the reasons, actually the reason we track by topic. The first reason is we organize by topic is we are, I think, the only tool I know of that acknowledges this blind spot of all of these tools and says none of us really know exactly how someone is going to ask for merchant cash advance companies to get a cash advance if they run a senior care facility. People are not going to literally type this in. But instead, what we want to know is if this topic comes up naturally between user and LLM, how likely is it that Redline Capital, our client, is going to be mentioned by different LLMs. So that's why we ask about it in multiple different ways. To say on average over, if you ask about it 5 ways, you can ask about it 10 ways. We have clients in this drop down where there are some topics where our strategist has asked about it 20 different ways to see what is that number. That we think is far more accurate. So when I click into, for example, fastest merchant cash advance for senior care facility, and we see a brand mentioned from ChatGPT, so we see the screenshot, it says number 3, Redline Capital, and it has a little blurb. It's not because someone's literally, we know that people are literally typing this in. No, this is just the best approximation. This is one of many ways you can ask about it. But you see at the topic level how you don't need to, when you measure in the topic-based way, you don't need to literally know anymore exactly how they ask about it, because it doesn't really matter. You say, look, we asked about merchant cash advance for senior care facilities in 3 different ways. And regardless of how they ask, it seems like every single time ChatGPT either cites or mentions Redline. Same with Perplexity, Gemini less, etc. And then when you look at a difference between topic, you can say, look at that versus if you asked without a specific industry, electrician, senior care, or lawn, if you just ask for the fastest merchant cash advance providers, it drops down. We are cited, but we're not mentioned as a brand once as fastest. So now the marketer has something to do, the content marketing team has something to do, if it matters to you as a brand in your positioning to be the fastest and to be noted and recommended by LLMs as the fastest merchant cash advance provider, you need to provide the content that does it. Now it looks like here we're starting to at least get the citations, and over time brand mentions hopefully will show up. But that means you have something to work on. You can publish more about this, you can change your positioning around this, you can tweak your content to talk about how fast you are, etc. Or in a starker contrast, now you're like, look, we have no visibility around revenue-based financing. No matter how we ask about it, it's mentioned 0. See what I mean? Now you don't need to know exactly how people ask about it. That whole SEO way of thinking of like, what's the keyword that people are typing in? Topic-based sort of moves that to the side and says, you don't really need to know how you're asking about revenue-based finance companies, because however you're asking, we don't seem to be visible. We asked about it 5 ways. And if you don't trust that, ask about it 5 more ways for a total of 10. Okay, so now let's click in. Fastest merchant cash advanced for senior care facilities. Redline is mentioned and cited. I want to point this out as an example of another myth in AI search that our data with Redline and many other clients busts, is that this idea that you can't get this kind of visibility with self-promotional posts. You can't. We're the number 1 citation, the first citation, and it's literally mentioning us. And let's compare. So inside here, how does it mention us? Redline Capital. ChatGPT says, specifically advertises MCAs, a particular nuance in their industry, for senior care facilities, merchant cash advance, and says it can fund qualifying facilities the same day based primarily on monthly revenue. And if we open the actual post, we can find it. Look. The third bullet in the intro, how much paperwork do they require? Most MCA lenders, merchant cash advance lenders, claim they can fund same day or next day, but they rarely deliver because their underwriting process demands too much documentation. And so you should look for some that do, and it advertises Redline Capital and H2, same day cash advance. And we say here in bold, we qualify applicants based entirely on monthly revenue, which is what cuts out the extensive financial review that slows down traditional ones. And if we go back and look at what ChatGPT says, look at this. Specifically advertises cash advance for senior care facilities and says it can fund qualifying facilities the same day, based primarily on monthly revenue. Where is it getting that argumentation from? It's getting it from this post. This is the only thing on the entire site that talks about merchant cash advance for senior care facilities. So this should bust all of these things that you see on LinkedIn, this narrative right now that, oh, you can't produce your own content that self-promotes you and have it work for LLMs. Absolutely you can. It's reading this content. By the way, it's Googled its way to it. We can check that. Merchant cash advance senior care facility. Now, I don't know what the exact fan out query is, but this should be good enough. Number 1 result, Redline Capital. Why is it number 1? Because this is such a specific query. We're going to be number 1. Although there are others. The number 2 and 3 are MCA debt for assisted living, MCA for assisted living facilities. And so it's found it through Googling. There's no way for a brand as new as Redline that this was just in its parametric model because it knew in the training data that Redline Capital had merchant cash advance for senior care facilities. No way. It found it through Googling. We wrote, so let me walk through the marketing steps to do this. Identify, we haven't really talked about this, but identify that senior care facilities is a segment that matters for them, that there's some search volume, that they can do merchant cash advance type loans for senior care facilities. Produce a detailed article about that, explaining and selling Redline, being unapologetically self-promotional, casting aside this LinkedIn marketing guru nonsense that you can't do self-promotional listicles. We do it. Have it rank. Then if anyone who has a senior care facility, by the way, they do not need to type this into ChatGPT, just to emphasize what I spent the last 10 minutes talking about it. As per invisible prompts, they don't need to. They can say, they can say, my business needs some kind of cash advance or a loan. And if they're a regular user, which nowadays business-wise almost everyone is, of Claude, ChatGPT, whatever, it'll say, okay, let me go find business loan, cash advance type companies that serve businesses like yours. If you don't believe me, read this post. There's an example in there of someone asking for a content agency who found us, which by the way, is the founder of Redline Capital. That I did not plan that. That's just a nice coincidence. The example we have in here. Long story short, that's sort of the story arc from beginning to end of how you get this kind of brand visibility. So for young brands, that's our recommendation. You start at tier 1, identify what the actual specific, and so read Prioritized GEO, read invisible prompts, read topic-based GEO. Or if you don't, I explained it to you already in this video. Is you need to identify the really specific topics, the use cases, maybe case studies, the pain points of your users, what type of user, just like cash advance for senior care facility, for electricians, for lawn care, etc. For manufacturing, you see we're starting to get visibility for manufacturing in Traqer. You identify those, produce good SEO articles. That's a separate topic. You can listen to our other videos or episodes about good SEO. You can read pain point SEO, Google pain point SEO for sort of the starting foundation of our SEO practice. We've been talking about that for 10 years. And you produce this work, you do proper SEO, the LLMs discover you when they search the web. They will search the web for these types of product, brand, business, product recommendations, service recommendations. They'll see yours and they'll parrot it back. It is not a coincidence that when I scroll through the Traqer dashboard for Redline, a new and early brand that's seeing this kind of nice overall AI visibility growth, that where that initial growth is happening and coming from is these specific, industry-specific topic areas. Because if we're just asked for general same-day loans, construction line of credit is industry-specific, but this is really competitive. Revenue-based financing companies is a classic example. Zero visibility. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 prompts across 5 LLMs, 25 combinations. Not a single citation or brand mention. This is really competitive. And Redline Capital is an up-and-coming new brand. So this is going to take time. But in the meantime, what you can do is you don't need to be the revenue-based financing company that all LLMs recommend from day one. That's not your only avenue in. There must be specific customers, use cases, verticals where you shine, where you have case studies, where you can talk about how you do really well and how you're a good fit there, whether it's your product, service, whatever. And there you can get those recommendations. And our argument is that's more aligned with how people actually use LLMs. They don't put in short key phrases. Sometimes they do, but mostly they're having conversations, and the LLMs have this invisible context. There's a ton of context that's invisible to all of us and your AI search tool. But they're going to recommend based on that context. So they're going to know when someone asks for a merchant cash advance, what kind of business they run. And they're going to look for content and companies that say, hey, we specialize in this. And nobody else, your competitors aren't doing this. So if you do this, you're winning out of the gate. Okay, some other cool Traqer features before I close. You can see how this changes when I move. So right now I'm using a Traqer feature at the top. It defaults to both. So everything it's measuring in terms of visibility is both citations and brand mentions. But if we move to just brand mentions, look at how much lower the numbers are. Now only 15 and 3. You see the shape of the graph. There's still growth in the graph, but it's much lower. This is natural and normal. And this is also why this narrative that's happening in AI search optimization online of citation, how do you get citation? How do you get ChatGPT to cite? Citations do not equal brand mentions. It's not the same thing. It's much easier to get cited. But if you are cited, like here, let's look at an example. Nope, I have it filtered to brand mentions. If we look at just citations, or actually let's go to both and find a scenario where there's a citation but not a brand mention. Merchant cash advance, same day funding. ChatGPT cites us number 9. We are one of a ton of citations. I'm going to read them out for people listening. NerdWallet, Simply Funding, Wall Street Journal, Money.com, Business.com, LendingTree.com, Forbes.com, then Redline Capital. First of all, I think that by itself is pretty impressive. If you want to talk about, self-promotional listicles from a brand don't work. Yeah, right. Look at this. ChatGPT, Merchant Cash Advance, Same Day Funding. Look at every other domain I listed. NerdWallet, Simply Funding, Wall Street Journal, Money.com, Business.com, LendingTree, Forbes. And then our client, Redline Capital Inc., one of a million different business loan companies. It works. But there's a difference between being cited and being mentioned. If you actually open up ChatGPT and you read this as a user, are you really going to click on the 9th citation? So this is a good sign from a marketing standpoint. And in fact, it actually mentions no brands. So that's another thing, is it actually doesn't even mention any brands because it treats this like an informational query. But if you're... So this is going to take time, and that's normal. It takes time to actually be a brand that it decides to actually mention. Another reason why you do topic-based GEO and start with really specific topics. So we can toggle there and see brand versus citation. Most tools don't even default to this, so pay attention. Citations is not the same thing as brands. And then the last thing I want to close on is talking about attribution. When this is starting, so it would be too much sort of revealing confidential and private information from the client to be showing their internal analytics, but I can explain it at a high level. What we're seeing here as we're getting coverage, especially in AIO and AI mode, is actually less people clicking into the actual articles. Meaning when these AI tools mention you as a brand, Redline Capital right here as a brand, and that's ChatGPT. If we look at AI overview, they Google fastest merchant cash advance for senior care facility, and it mentions Redline Capital right here. In this case, in this AI overview, I'm showing it happens to be linked. You know from your own experience reading AI overviews, I'm sure the vast majority of the time it's mentioning brands, it does not link them. What are the people going to do? They're going to copy and paste the name or just remember it, open a new tab, and Google the brand name. They're going to get to the homepage and they're going to click in that way. You will have no idea what piece of content actually got you that lead because it looks like either direct to your homepage or it looks like it's Google organic to your homepage. Not entirely, like here, we're the #1 citation in AI overviews. They may actually click into it. So you'll see some. We're not talking about complete 1 and 0. It's not like traffic to individual blog posts has gone to 0. That's absolutely not true. But it's significantly reduced because some sizable portion of people that would have normally in the pre-AI world have clicked into the article because that was the only option before AI overview existed, before ChatGPT existed a few years ago. Now they're going to see it mentioned by name, Redline Capital. And so from a measurement standpoint, what you need to do as a marketing team reporting to executives, reporting to clients or whatever, is you're going to need to have more holistic attribution where you're looking at what about overall leads from just the homepage? What about overall leads from direct in GA4 versus total organic? And also leads from specific URLs, articles, and blog posts on your site. And you look at that holistically and see overall growth. Because as your AI search visibility grows, you're going to start to see, oh, we're just like the individual blog post stuff's not happening. Yeah, because you're mentioned as a brand up top now. So this, I hope, was useful. Ask questions. If you want me to help break this down, if you want us to break it down or give advice on your brands, ask us questions in the comments, or you can email us. You can find our email by signing up for our newsletter at growandconvert.com/newsletter. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. You can also get the audio-only versions of these shows wherever you get your podcasts. And you can follow us at growandconvert.com/newsletter for any articles and updates for when these videos come out.